Lila Brooks had never stepped foot into a world like this. The sprawling estate loomed ahead, its windows gleaming under the afternoon sun, and every detail whispered wealth she had only glimpsed in magazines. Today marked her first day as the new housemaid, and while her heart raced with nerves, she carried herself with quiet determination. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath, reminding herself that she belonged here as much as anyone else, at least in her own way. Inside, the mansion smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, a scent both comforting and intimidating. Lila moved through the grand hallway, careful not to let her shoes echo too loudly on the marble floors. She had learned quickly that this household demanded perfection, and she intended to prove herself. Ethan Montgomery, the man of the house, watched from the study doorway. Tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding a calm authority, he observed Lila without speaking. There was something in the way she carried herself, a mix of nervousness and grace, that caught his attention immediately. He wasn't used to noticing the people who worked for him, but she was different. The first task came quickly, organizing the guest room for an unexpected visitor. Lila's hands moved swiftly, her focus absolute. When a stack of important documents teetered from the desk, Ethan instinctively reached out. "Careful," he said, his voice low but kind. Lila smiled, accepting the papers. "Thank you, sir." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the world outside the mansion didn't exist. A brief, polite hug of gratitude passed between them as Ethan offered his hand. Neither spoke, yet both felt a subtle spark, a quiet recognition that this day might change everything. The mansion was quieter than Lila had expected. Most mornings, the staff moved like clockwork, their routines almost invisible. Today, she noticed how much care Ethan put into even the smallest details, checking the arrangement of books in his study, straightening frames along the hallway. Lila admired his attention to detail, though she reminded herself not to stare too long. She was a guest in this world, and first impressions mattered. Ethan, meanwhile, found himself drawn to her presence. It wasn't just that she was meticulous or polite, it was something in her warmth. She moved with a calm energy, carrying herself confidently even as she adjusted to this enormous home. He caught glimpses of her humming softly while dusting, a melody that lingered longer than the tune itself. It made him smile without intending to. Their paths crossed again in the garden, where Lila was watering the flowers. A stray document had blown from the study, landing near her feet. "Here," Ethan said, handing it over. Their fingers brushed, and he felt an unexpected jolt, not romantic, not yet, but something that made him notice her more than usual. "Thank you," Lila said softly, a slight blush on her cheeks. She hesitated, then stepped a little closer, offering a gentle hug as a gesture of thanks. Ethan's arms were stiff at first, unsure of how to respond, but he returned it naturally, holding it just long enough to make her smile. For a brief moment, the garden seemed suspended in time. The flowers, the sunlight, the quiet chirping of birds, it all felt like the world had softened just for them. Both knew it was only a small connection, but it mattered. And in a house filled with grandeur and rules, it was the first sign of something more. Ethan had never paid much attention to birthdays. In his world of schedules and boardrooms, personal celebrations were often overlooked. But today, Lila had decided to change that, quietly planning a small gesture that no one else would even notice. She had baked a cake in the mansion's grand kitchen, frosting it carefully and arranging a few fresh flowers on the table. Ethan appeared in the kitchen unexpectedly, drawn by the faint smell of vanilla and something sweeter, a quiet warmth that seemed different from the usual bustle of the house. He watched as Lila adjusted the cake plate with a careful hand, her focus absolute, her cheeks slightly pink. For the first time, he realized she had thought about him in a way no one else ever had. "Is this for me?" he asked, his voice low, surprised. Lila nodded, smiling shyly. "I thought it might make your day a little brighter." Ethan was taken aback. Not by the cake, he had eaten plenty, but by the thought behind it. Someone had cared enough to notice, to act, without expectation or reward. Before he could speak further, Lila stepped closer, holding out the cake with a tentative smile. "Happy birthday, sir," she whispered. Something in that simple gesture, the way her eyes met his, made Ethan's chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. He leaned down, giving her a heartfelt hug of gratitude. It was brief, but long enough for both to feel it. A connection deeper than words, a warmth that lingered even after they stepped apart. For Ethan, it was a reminder that even in a world of wealth and precision, genuine kindness mattered most. And for Lila, it was the first hint that her quiet gestures might be reaching something real in him. The day ended with Ethan quietly staring at the cake, thinking how rare it was to feel so seen, while Lila washed her hands with a soft smile. Something had shifted, just a little but enough to make the mansion feel a little more like home. Lila had always been proud of who she was, but today, walking through the mansion in her simple uniform, she felt the weight of difference more than ever. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the walls lined with priceless art, it all whispered a language she hadn't grown up speaking. Even the other staff seemed to move with an ease she envied. Ethan noticed it immediately. He saw the way her eyes lingered on the ornate furniture, a mixture of awe and unease, the subtle hesitancy in her movements. He wasn't one to intrude, but something inside him urged him to bridge that gap, to show her that she belonged here as much as anyone. "Lila," he called softly, catching her as she paused in the hallway. "Is everything all right?" She smiled nervously, adjusting her apron. "I'm fine, sir. Just, still learning my way around." Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle. "You're doing better than you realize. This place can be overwhelming, but you're handling it well." For a moment, the mansion felt less like a castle and more like a home. Lila felt her shoulders relax under his quiet reassurance. She had expected him to be distant, cold even, but instead he was watching her with something more thoughtful, more human. Thank you, sir," she said, her voice soft. Without thinking, she leaned in for a brief hug, an instinctive gesture of gratitude. Ethan returned it naturally, careful and steady, holding her just long enough to let her know she wasn't alone in this world of grandeur. When they parted, Lila felt a warmth lingering in her chest. And Ethan, glancing at her retreating figure, realized he wanted to see that smile more than he had expected. In a house built on rules and wealth, this small moment felt like the beginning of something far greater. The rain came suddenly, drumming against the mansion's roof and turning the garden into a tapestry of shimmering droplets. Lila had been tending the flower beds when the first drops fell, and she dashed toward the greenhouse, her apron soaked at the hem. She wasn't alone for long. Ethan followed, holding the door open with a calm, unspoken patience. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant, the scent of wet earth mingling with the greenery. Lila shook her hair, laughing softly at the sudden chaos of the storm. Ethan watched her, intrigued by the effortless way she adapted, finding joy even in the rain. They settled near the large window, the world outside a blur of silver rain and swaying branches. Lila began speaking about her childhood, about small dreams she had held onto despite hardships. Ethan, in turn, shared glimpses of his own youth, of the weight of expectations and the loneliness that sometimes came with wealth. For hours, the storm outside became a gentle backdrop to their conversation. They talked and laughed, revealing pieces of themselves rarely shown to anyone else. In the quiet moments between sentences, a subtle understanding grew, a feeling that they weren't just noticing each other but truly seeing one another. When the rain finally slowed, Lila shivered slightly. Without hesitation, Ethan draped a blanket over her shoulders. She smiled, leaning into the warmth. And then, in a simple, unspoken gesture, they shared a lingering hug, both drawing comfort from the closeness. It was not a spark of romance yet, but a recognition of trust and care, a silent promise of protection and companionship. As they stepped back and watched the last drops fall, Lila felt lighter, and Ethan realized that for the first time in a long while, he looked forward to seeing someone smile every day, just hers. Rumors had a way of sneaking into the quietest corners of the mansion. Today, one such whisper reached Ethan, planted by a careless coworker who misunderstood Lila's friendly manner with the rest of the staff. He saw her laughing with another employee and misread the warmth in her smile as something improper. For a moment, a sharp edge of frustration crept in, though Ethan couldn't fully explain why. He kept his distance, his thoughts clouded, while Lila noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. Her chest tightened. Had she done something wrong? She replayed her actions in her mind, realizing only kindness had guided them. Later, in the quiet of the afternoon, she approached him, hesitant. "Sir, is everything all right?" she asked softly, her voice cautious but steady. Ethan turned to her, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, I'm fine," he said, but Lila could see the tension lingering. Still, their connection refused to be broken. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know you meant no harm," he admitted, a small warmth returning to his tone. "I just misinterpreted something." Lila exhaled, relief washing over her. Without thinking, she offered a simple, heartfelt hug. Ethan held it gently, appreciating her courage and honesty, letting the misunderstanding dissolve in that quiet embrace. For both, the hug was more than reassurance. It was a reaffirmation that their bond could withstand confusion and distance. And as they stepped apart, exchanging a small, understanding smile. It became clear. The growing feelings between them were not easily shaken. Even amid the vast halls and rigid rules of the mansion, moments like these reminded them that genuine connection could thrive anywhere. And perhaps they realized this was only the beginning of something deeper. The mansion was quiet at night, with only the faint hum of the heating system and the distant ticking of clocks filling the rooms. Lila, carrying a tray with tea, found Ethan still at his office desk, papers spread around him like a small fortress of responsibilities. She hesitated for a moment, watching him work, then stepped softly into the room. "Tea," she said, offering the cup with a shy smile. Ethan looked up, surprised by the quiet persistence in her eyes. "Thank you, Lila. I didn't realize you'd still be awake." She shrugged lightly. "I thought you might need it. You've been working so hard lately." He paused, studying her. The way she cared, without judgment, without expectation, touched him more than he expected. For years he had kept people at arm's length, but here she was, reaching out in her gentle way. They talked, first about trivial things, the weather, the day's tasks, but soon the conversation shifted. Lila shared stories of her family, of small dreams she held close. Ethan, surprisingly, found himself revealing pieces of his own life, the pressures of wealth, the loneliness hidden behind the mansion's grandeur. He had never spoken so openly with anyone, yet with her, it felt natural. At one point, Lila set the tray aside and without thinking, leaned in for a hug. It was brief but tender, a silent acknowledgement of understanding and trust. Ethan held her gently, feeling the weight of unspoken words and the warmth of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both felt a quiet certainty. This bond was growing stronger, built on more than just kindness. In the stillness of the night, surrounded by papers and quiet walls, they realized that sometimes the simplest gestures, like a shared cup of tea or a heartfelt hug, could speak louder than any words ever could. The mansion buzzed with preparation for the charity gala, a grand event where the city's elite would gather under sparkling chandeliers and flowing gowns. Lila moved quietly among the staff, arranging floral centerpieces and polishing silverware, her hands steady despite the enormity of the occasion. Ethan observed her from across the ballroom, noticing the way she carried herself with calm confidence, even in a world that seemed so far removed from her own. He approached her, his footsteps soft against the marble floor. "Lila," he said, stopping beside her. "I'd like you to come to the gala with me." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Me? But you," he interrupted gently, smiling. "I want you there. Not because you work here, but because I value your company." She hesitated, feeling the weight of the invitation. A gala was intimidating, a world she had never imagined herself entering. Yet, the sincerity in his eyes left her no choice but to accept. "I'd be honored," she said softly. Later, dressed modestly but elegantly in a gown she had nervously chosen herself, Lila found Ethan waiting at the entrance. His gaze softened as he offered his arm, and together they stepped into the glittering room. Throughout the evening, Ethan introduced her with quiet pride, and Lila felt a surprising ease amidst the grandeur. When a lull came, he drew her aside away from the crowd, and pulled her into a supportive hug. It was warm, grounding, and spoke more of reassurance than words ever could. In that simple embrace, Lila felt a sense of belonging, and Ethan realized that sharing these moments with her made even the most extravagant events feel personal and meaningful. As the music played softly in the background, both understood. In a mansion of wealth and rules, the simplest connections, shared smiles, quiet conversations, and heartfelt hugs, were worth far more than any luxury. The weekend had arrived, bringing with it a quiet reprieve from the mansion's usual routines. Ethan and Lila had volunteered together at a local community project, painting walls and arranging donated books. For Lila, it was a chance to step outside her usual world, and for Ethan, a rare opportunity to see life beyond contracts and meetings. By the end of the day, both were covered in paint smudges and dirt, yet their laughter echoed across the hallways of the community center. Ethan found himself stealing glances at Lila, noticing the way her eyes sparkled even in the simplest moments, the way her laughter felt like sunlight after rain. He realized with a clarity that startled him, that he could not imagine a life without her presence, her warmth, her unwavering kindness. Lila too felt something shift. Watching Ethan interact with children, patient and gentle, she saw the man behind the mansion, the one who cared quietly and deeply. Her heart swelled with admiration and affection. The bond they had been nurturing in quiet moments and stolen hugs had grown into something undeniable. As the evening settled, they found themselves walking through a garden lit by the soft glow of lanterns. The world felt hushed as if holding its breath. Ethan stopped and turned toward her. "Lila," he said softly, "I don't want to imagine my days without you." Lila's eyes shimmered. She stepped closer and they shared a long, heartfelt hug. It was not just gratitude or friendship. It was an acknowledgement of love, of trust, of a connection that had blossomed naturally over time. In that embrace, both knew something important. This was the beginning of forever, not just a fleeting feeling. And under the lantern-lit sky, the mansion and all its grandeur seemed distant, because what mattered most was the bond they had built together. The mansion was quiet that evening, yet it felt warmer than ever before. Ethan and Lila sat together in the small library, a soft fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, but inside, the only brilliance was the comfort of being together. Their journey had been subtle, marked by small gestures, a shared laugh, a thoughtful cup of tea, a gentle hug in a quiet garden. Tonight, all those moments culminated in something they both understood without words. They had found a home in each other. Ethan reached for Lila's hand, holding it firmly yet tenderly. "I want every day to be like this," he said, his voice steady, full of promise. "Not the grandeur, not the wealth, but us. Together." Lila's eyes shone with warmth. "I feel the same, Ethan. I've never felt more at peace anywhere." They leaned into each other, sharing a long, heartfelt hug that spoke of commitment, trust, and love built over time. It was a hug that said everything words could not. "I am yours and you are mine." In the days that followed, their life settled into a quiet rhythm. They shared breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, walked hand in hand through the garden, and laughed over small, private jokes. The mansion no longer felt imposing. It felt like the setting of a love story they had written together, chapter by chapter. And in that peaceful contentment, both knew one thing for certain. Love wasn't about extravagance or grand gestures. It was about being present, being kind, and holding each other close. Their story, built on trust, care, and heartfelt hugs, was only beginning. And for anyone watching or listening, perhaps it's a gentle reminder. Sometimes, love finds us in the quietest moments, and those are the ones worth holding forever.